Ableton Live 11.3, there's a new synthesizer called Drift. And Drift is meant to be extremely expressive and to capture the inconsistencies and warmth of real analog hardware synthesizers. And if you've paid any attention to the sound design work I've done in my hundreds of Ableton Live packs over the last few years, then you can probably guess that I love Drift. I've been designing my own presets for Drift for the last couple weeks, and it's incredible. Right now you're hearing me improvise on some of those presets I made with Drift. I've got a free pack of 10 presets that you can have for your music over at brianfunk.com/drift. It even includes a 16-pad drum rack where each drum sound is made up of a Drift preset. But I actually made 50 different presets. And all 50 of those presets are only available to members of my music production club because you guys are my biggest supporters. Members of the music production club always get my newest creation as soon as it's released. My educational materials, including video courses, my books, helpful PDFs, and they're part of a really cool, supportive community of fellow music makers. And I love that community. We have a Discord server where I get to hear people's music. We get together and hang out for live Zoom meetings, share our music, share tips, do projects together. It's so much fun and really exciting and inspiring for me to share this community with everybody. And there's also bonus materials for the Music Production Club, which are basically just free stuff from my store that I put on there every once in a while. So if you want to get all 50 of these Drift presets, sign up for the Music Production Club at brianfunk.com/MPC. I'm really proud of these presets. They're so expressive and deep, and some of them have maybe a reverb or a delay on them, or maybe an arpeggiator, but almost all of them are just Drift itself without any effects. It's amazing what you can do with this synthesizer, and I had a lot of fun making these sounds. And I think they're going to work really nicely in all kinds of different music genres. So if you want to get your hands on 10 free Drift presets, go to brianfunk.com/drift. If you want all 50, join the club. brianfunk.com/MPC. Thanks a lot and enjoy this episode of the Music Production Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have the host and creator of the 12-Hour Sound Machines podcast. This is Brandon Reed. He's running this show. It's purely long form, super long form. As everyone's going short form these days, YouTube, TikTok, Brandon is going in the complete opposite direction with 12-hour episodes that help people fall asleep, relax, meditate. And it's wildly successful. It's got 95 million downloads to date, 300,000 a day. It's really impressive as a podcaster myself to see numbers like that. And there's a lot of cool, I think, like music recording and production things behind these episodes, because one of the things that he states in the title, even though these are not loops, these are not faded into each other. So I'm curious how you managed to do that. But Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks so much. Yeah, good to be here.
Congratulations on the show. I mean, your success is really impressive. It's such a great idea too, because it's really a practical thing that so many people can use help with, just getting to sleep and relaxing. And you're using sound and, well, not really even music, just to do that. It's really cool that you're providing that for people.
Yeah, thanks. I wish I could tell you I had this epiphany in the middle of the night of like, oh, I'll create a podcast for helping people sleep. Really, it was just out of sheer need for what I needed for myself and for my baby who wasn't sleeping. My then newborn, who's now, I guess, about 4.5, wasn't sleeping. And so I created, I was looking for this solution. I was looking for it, and it exists as like standalone apps, but I was looking for it streamable online, because I was trying to do it through my smart speaker, through like a routine I had. I would click a button and the lights would go down and like lullabies would start. And then like I would click the button again and it would go into a white noise. This is what I wanted for my son to sleep all night. And couldn't find anything. And so I was like, okay, I'll just create some brown noise, which is like white noise, but deeper, fuller. And I had some experience in some audio in my background, and so I was just like, okay. So I just created that, and then the thing that I was finding that I couldn't find myself, that I was seeing was an issue online, was like that, yeah, things kept looping. Like you would hear a click, or you'd hear it like audibly adjust and start like every 30 seconds, or they were just music files streamable online for like 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And they're actually pretty popular. I have no idea how people sleep to like things fading at 3 minutes and then coming back in as like a separate frequency for another 4 minutes. But those were all over the place. But what I just created was, 12 hours. And I just said no loops or fades in the title, because that's the issue I was solving for myself, and expected nobody to find it. But then pretty organically and quickly, it started growing from there.
Right. I think probably a lot of producers are familiar with using white noise for risers and fallers, especially in electronic music. It's in like every single song where there's that, before something big happens. It's a really effective tool, but just as background noise, it's also, a lot of people find it very comforting just to have that kind of a drone going on.
Yeah, for sure. Brown noise in particular is kind of like new on the scene. White noise has served the purpose of sound masking for a really long time. People have used that either just on speakers or in their headphones to mask outside noises as they're studying or meditating or sleeping, for sure. And then brown noise, I mean, I don't know like the data on it of when it started becoming more, and of course it's always been around, like the sound has always existed, but people calling it something and using it more popularly, I don't know how long it's been around, but I've just seen it in the more recent years, like last 5-7 years or whatever. And I started using it for working. And then sleeping as well. We actually use like a fan in our room, but then we started using brown noise more like for my work. We started using it in our room to sleep as well. And yeah, it masks noise really well, but I don't know. The way I see people talking about it is actually really accurate. They keep putting words to like the way I feel about brown noise or pink noise or white noise, and that it feels like it's like a blanket for your brain, people will say, or it like zeroes out your thoughts. And I very much find that to be the case. And I've looked into a lot of the science of this as this has become more popular, this show. This is actually what I do full time now. I worked for Disney for 10 years and built technology mobile apps for them. And then this is what I'm doing full time. And as I've looked more into like, okay, why is this working? And like, why are people finding it helpful? How can I make sure it continues to be helpful as I look to create more sounds? And there's real science behind actually what happens to your brain when there's a constant. I explain it as like the fidget toy for your ears. I love to play with things, and my hands have done it all my life. Like I need something passive in my hands to engage with my mind. And this serves that purpose a little bit more in the background, I guess, or I don't know. It's always going. And if my brain is like doing this very, very background concentration on whatever this noise is, like intaking this noise, I find that I'm more able to actively engage in other things like more deeply. And so that's the way I use it, is like as almost like a focus tool, but it certainly also masks the noise of now I have 2 children running around outside of my room, and it's really helpful to have it to mask that as well.
Yeah, I think our senses are really tuned to change, right? So, and this is good to know for music production too, that we pick up on when things are different. And this is why like you can have like your air conditioner running all day long and you don't even notice it until it shuts off. And you're like, oh, wow. And I find
Do you by any chance sleep to noise of any kind?
No, not too much, though we often do have some kind of, well, I mean, the air conditioner or sometimes the heat does make a noise. It's got a fan in there. So
yeah, for sure. So what, like if you've ever slept to a static noise, or if you, or even just work to it or whatever, something, that's a great example. Even if you haven't turned it on a timer, like a speaker or something, but it's like a fan in the background or an air conditioner that does turn on and off. It's pretty jarring. Your brain, but it becomes this new normal. If you've ever heard of that study where that scientist wore those glasses, this will come around and be applicable, I promise, but these glasses where it flipped everything backwards and upside down. And he like strapped himself to a chair because you like can't move. It literally turns your world upside down. It's really hard to focus, but his brain adjusted. And then after it was something like 72 hours or something of wearing the glasses, his brain flipped everything and it became normal. And then he took them off again and everything went backwards, which would be terrifying because you'd be like, uh-oh, what have I done? But then his brain readjusted. And it's a similar thing that when you hear this constant noise, maybe for the first 30 seconds, especially if you're doing it for like the first or second time, it can feel like, oh man, what constant noise. This is not, but your brain readjusts to that. And then when it shuts, it's pretty jarring, and it'll wake you up for sure. And so, yes, that's really good. And then you also hit on something else, Brian. You were like, as we think about music production and audio production and what people's ears are tuned to, man, I tell you, my community is actually really engaged, and people will. There's been like 2 separate times that my catalog has gone through an adjustment that has changed the audio. Like once was I switched podcast hosts, and they can, without telling me, compressed my audio from 192 kilobytes per second to what was it? It was all the way down to like 96 or 128, and it garbled everything. It made everything sound, that really pixelated audio sound, and people reached out immediately. Like I knew immediately that something was wrong with my audio, because especially with like the more static noises, that became really, really noticeable. And one other funny example I always share is I had early on, first year or so, I had the podcast. I was just running Pink, Brown, and White. That was like the whole show. And so I had the white noise. I was listening to it one day, and I was like, yeah, this is a little too high for me. I'm going to like adjust it and put in some more lows and like reduce some highs. And I did that, and somebody reached out to me within a couple hours, found my number on the internet. I have no idea. Text me. Was like, are you by any chance the Brandon of 12-Hour Sound Machines? I was like, what? Yes. And he's like, I'm so sorry. This is super creepy. I'm reaching out, but I had to track you down. Your white noise is the only thing my twins will sleep to, and you just changed it. And my wife made me track you down. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. Well, because of your incredible perseverance, I will absolutely. And I changed it back for him because I was like, that's just impressive. But it just goes to speak to your point of like, yeah, people absolutely notice the tiniest differences. And that can be a big deal if you listen to something over a long period of time, for sure.
Wow, that's really funny, because just those differences are changing the sleep.
Apparently it matters to babies too. His babies weren't sleeping to the new white noise, which was like almost an imperceptible difference, but perceptible enough, I suppose.
Got like an audiophile child there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's cool. I was wondering if maybe you might explain just the difference of white versus pink versus brown. They have different applications in music as well. But there's I like the way you described it as a warm blanket. I think that was for the brown, and I get why you'd say that, and maybe just so people understand. And we'll get into some of the other sounds you're doing, because the show is not just 3 episodes of those noises. A lot of really interesting stuff you're doing, but maybe you can clear up those differences.
Yeah, for sure. So that's everybody's main question is like, oh my gosh, seriously, like noises have colors now? Like, what's the difference? And all you have to do is just hear it. Even the ones that are less, that are more similar to one another, there are absolutely differences. You can hear them right away. But the 3 big ones that most people have heard about, if they've heard about any noise colors, are pink, white, and brown. And white is the classic. Everybody knows it is TV static, that really high, like, I don't know if this will come across the mic, but like that really high static. Brown is that low, introduces a lot more lows and even some mids, and removes a lot of highs. It's that like, it's not even really static anymore. It's almost like oh man, I don't even know how to explain it. You just have to listen to it. There's static in there, but it's less of that. Yeah. Like, it's less of the static noise and more of like just a solid blanket for your ears is what I keep describing it as, and that really is pretty accurate. And then pink is literally a combination of the two. That's what I did with mine. I took the two and I overlaid them. Not everybody does that. I mean, you'll go onto YouTube and type in pink noise, and you'll click on 12 different videos and hear 12 different types of pink noise. So it's really, really subjective. It's not a science what you call these things, but the sounds themselves, there's absolutely science to like what they do to your brain based on the lower to the higher. And it's not the same for everybody. Like a higher noise, higher frequency white noise may do something different for one person's brain than the other. But in general, you look at like white noise is the gold standard for sound masking. That like cancels out most the other frequencies happening in ambient audio, like around you. And that will do the best for that. Brown noise, it still does a great job of sound masking. It's a huge part of what I use it for, but it's not as good. It's more like soothing. It puts you like more in a state of a soothing and a centered and a equal kind of state. And then a pink noise is just the way I hear people describe it and how they're using it. I put like a Q&A on my episodes. I'm like, how are you guys using this? And most people talk about pink as they use it for, they like both things. They like that white noise cancels out sound really well, but they love how brown noise makes them feel. So they basically use pink noise as like a nice low brown noise, but with the sound masking qualities of white noise, because you can hear a lot more of that static in there. Kind of the main three. The other two that are really popular on the show are green noise and violet noise. Green noise is that's even harder to describe. It's like an in-between of, it's almost like a mashup of all those. Green noise, what they call it, is kind of like the sound of nature. It sounds like a waterfall. It's like the most, it's kind of like an aggregate of almost all frequencies you'll hear just in the world around you that are brought together in like a static constant noise, and a lot of people like that. And then violet noise is really hard to listen to because it is very high frequency. It's basically pulling all the lows and mids out, and it's just a very high frequency static. If you suffer from tinnitus or tinnitus, whatever you want to say, tinnitus or tinnitus where the ringing in your ears, that is like a miracle. It is a tinnitus destroyer. Like people, they put it in and they're like, oh my gosh, I have tried everything. People will write me emails or comment in the episodes and say, I have had, tinnitus for 7 years, and this is the first thing that makes it go away. It's actually pretty remarkable. But it's hard to listen to if you don't struggle with that, if you're not listening to it to remove that ringing from your ears, because it's pretty grating. But it does the job of what it's doing. So those are kind of the 5 main ones on the show.
That's cool.
And then I combine those noises with a lot of other things. Like that's what I was like, man, people love this stuff. I'll combine brown noise with rain. People love rain. People love brown noise. And I just made both. And like those episodes are also some of my most popular on the show, is my brown, pink, and white plus other things.
That's cool. I use a lot of noise and a lot of nature noises actually in music when I make songs, and just gently in the background, or sometimes it is even just like the room noise, just whatever's going on in the room, just an ambience, because when I'm recording in the computer and everything's digital, it's not like we have a tape machine that has like a pleasant noise to it. It's got that nice tape hiss. Sometimes it's just too sterile. So putting in just a little bit of noise, sometimes it's like a tape hiss, or sometimes it is just white noise, or it's just my microphone out the window, or just having a microphone recording nothing in the room, really does a lot to give it like continuity and cohesion that you kind of lose when you're in this sterile, empty silence. I mean, they have some room somewhere in Europe, I think, that is the quietest room in the world.
Oh, no way, man.
And people can't even stay in there.
Yeah.
Just that.
Yeah. I can't do silence. I always tell my wife, like, that's part of why I started listening to brown noise years ago, was I just like, I do not like silence. I actually have some tinnitus as well, worse in one ear than the other, but like the ringing starts really pulsing if I'm in quiet. Like when I'm driving on the road and then I park in my driveway and shut off the car and it's just dead silent, I'm like, yeah, like gotta get out of my car. And so, yeah, I totally, silence, like real silence, which nobody actually hears real silence, but just quiet can be unnerving for people, especially in just such a busy and noisy world. Everybody lives where there's noise. And so to have no noise can be definitely jarring.
Yeah, I think you start hearing like your internal, your heart, blood rushing. And,
that's right.
Yeah, I don't need to be listening to that.
Right, that's right.
So I could imagine how you would do like your noise samples without looping or fading them. I'm guessing this is like maybe in a DAW, just stretch it out for 12 hours. right?
Yeah. So I can talk a lot about how I think about what noises will be helpful, how my audience resonates them, but I don't have a ton of awesome value to provide as far as how these noises get pulled all the way over 12 hours. I did them at the beginning, but I was not very good at it. I now pass them to a sound engineer to do that because I wanted it done well and seamlessly. I'll definitely though say like the secret, which surely people assume, is that it's not actually technically no loops. It's never fades in and out, but I don't record 12 hours of a running brook or a waterfall. Though I have samples. Either I go out and record them just like on my own, or there's lots of, if it's not something that takes like a high fidelity sound, I'll go find open source audio online that's under the CCL license that I can just grab short clips like a mourning dove, like cooing for 8 seconds or something. If I want to throw that just once in a park scene of like a public park sound machine, and it doesn't have a mourning dove, but I would love to hear that. So it'll coo every 7 minutes. And I'll use that and layer them in. But what I always tell my audio engineer is make it random. Like I don't want that mourning dove every 90 seconds because over 12 hours, over 30 minutes, that'll drive you nuts. Right. So like randomize it over a sample set. And then you can, if you need to like do 4 and 4 hours, that's fine. But get a really huge sample set of nothing repeating. And then you can maybe, loop that over. Most everybody, I would say, kind of anecdotally, but also I did run a survey through Spotify that you can run surveys on episodes and said, how are you sleeping to this? Are you studying to this? Whatever. And it's around 85% of my audience sleeps to these episodes. And most people aren't taking, 3 or 4 hours to fall asleep. So as long as you can get something long enough that is not repeating and not annoying over hours, they'll fall asleep. And then you can, if you need to run that 4 hour set, two more times past the one, it's not a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because that answers a few questions. Like I have storms you got storms on there, lots of storms. They don't always last 12 hours. Snow doesn't always fall
or with the same
hours.
Intensity for 12 hours. And I've recorded storms where it's really intense and then, I just need an hour. I just want an hour. It's really intense for 45 minutes and then it backs off for 10 minutes and then comes back. And I'll edit that part out. Like I want consistency over anything. And so, but anymore, as long as you're not doing anything that it's like minutes long, right, you can loop it and it sounds completely seamless, even to the most discerning ear, especially those things that are pretty much just like a white noise, like a rain, a constant torrential downpour. There's just unless there's a click or something, you're not going to notice looping over. But I always try to make sure that the sample set is at least a few hours long.
Yeah, I found that in my experiments with putting that in my music, where as long as it's at a consistent energy,
consistent energy is a good way to say it.
Just a little crossfade, and then we're good to go. But if it changes suddenly, then it's like, well, we got to do something about that. Because that's cool, yeah. Because cars need gas after a while. Night ends. This is something that said,
right.
like the day that happens. So like you can't keep you got to really cool them with owls going for a while. That I thought was really fun.
I did. Was it today? No, it was Friday. I posted popcorn in a microwave.
Yeah,
and I did not make popcorn for 12 hours or bath filling up. I did not fill a bath for 12 hours. That one was a little tricky to do with my engineer because I wanted it's a really good way to say a consistent energy. Like the bath is filling up and it's a very different sound when it's empty and just the first drops go in to when it's full and it's hitting a full pool of water. And so to hit that medium and it's basically this perpetual filling up that's always basically right in the middle of the bathtub. It's like not, it's not a full bathtub and it's not just the first drops. And so that can get a little tricky, but as long as it's consistent, yeah.
Would that be that audio illusion? The shepherd tone? That's what I'm thinking of.
Oh, I've definitely heard of that, but I couldn't define it for you, but I've definitely heard of it.
The shepherd tone is an audio illusion where it sounds like the sound is just continuously rising forever.
Oh,
it's just going up. And it's a complicated way of like fading things in and out that are always rising. But it has a really cool effect. There's even a stage in a Super Mario game where you're climbing this stairway that kind of goes up
Oh,
forever, and
funny.
they use like this like same sort of trick, you know. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how about the actual recording process? That could make a big difference. And you've got things that happen sometimes like underwater and in very difficult environments to record even.
Yeah.
And you say you do some of that on your own. You get out there when you can.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, my process is actually pretty straightforward. I have it's a Zoom H1N. I've recorded on like the Tascam X8, and just that's pretty straightforward. I don't even run. There's a lot of people that run, like XY stereo, multiple like external microphones. I really have only ever used like the on unit microphones on these little portable field recorders, and excuse me, and it's that's done just fine. I probably record the sounds. Oh, I don't know. At the beginning, I mean, at the beginning I did almost all of it, but anymore I probably only record like 25% of what I use. The rest are like a library of open source audio that because now I have this engineer who's really skilled at getting them all together and putting them all together. Before I was like, man, I don't know how to blend these in a way that sound good together, and so I got to just go record it myself. And so I did a lot of that at the beginning, and then I've just now. It won't be till maybe next week or the next week that I'll release the first episodes of this. But I started looking at, all right, I want to do like sounds of the world. I want to do like things around the world. I want to capture more like nostalgic audio. I think that nostalgia is a big part of this. People listen like, I have a grandfather clock ticking for 12 hours, and people are just like, man, that puts me right back to my grandparents' living room floor when I used to stay the night. And people are really nostalgically connected to sounds, as we all are. Like, we know when we hear that thing that triggers that memory. And so I'm like, how can I get like festivals around the world and public parks around the world? Things that people like evening summers, like in the Midwest, like people will recognize those insects and those sounds. And there's a couple that travels around the world and captures ambient audio. Their channel, their brand is called Free to Use Sounds. And I reached out to them and just said like, hey, you guys travel the world and grab these sounds, like let's partner. We can work together. If I could use some of your audio, we're co-branding, like I'm promoting them, and we'll start working together more. And that's going to be really helpful because it's hard to find open source quality audio. And so, yeah, I would have to just go out and like record a lot myself, but I'm less and less able to do that. And so I'm partnering with people who are going out and grabbing these sounds, especially the harder to get ones like that. What did we end up using for that underwater one? It's called a hydrophone. You like actually put it underwater and record a fan. And I had somebody that I knew who had one. And so we hooked it up and we did it. And those are trickier, but that's expensive equipment. And like I used it for one thing, and I'm glad I had somebody I knew who had it, so I didn't have to buy it just for that. But they have all this equipment. They travel around the world and do it for a living. And so we're going to partner together and work on some sounds together. And then as we go, we'll do more of like, as I hear what my audience is resonating with some of these sounds, we'll work together on going and getting specific stuff based on what people want to hear.
I love that idea because places really do have a sound, and especially when you start talking, if you're into like what kind of insects are there and what kind of birds and all of that stuff. Even just like cities, Paris at night, there's just so much fun you can have with that. And
for sure.
Transport people a little bit before they start dreaming,
Yeah, exactly. Yep, for sure. And I think that if that series that I'm looking at doing, I feel like I don't want to branch out of people sleeping. That's clearly helpful. It's like utility value and it's what's grown the show. But I also want to branch into other things that can be helpful in other ways or used in other ways. And I think that will be less of people sleeping to that and more of people like, yeah, I'm living overseas right now, but I'm from Nebraska, and hearing a summer, night after a rainstorm in the Midwest of the United States, I think that could be like, yeah, really nostalgic and like homesick, aiding. And so people can listen to that, as they study or work or whatever, and just feel like home. So I think that can also accomplish something like that.
Right. Yeah. My wife and friends all do this convention for tabletop gaming. and they have an escape room. They have like a live dungeon and things. And it's been
Nice.
my job in the past to create these sounds for these rooms.
Nice.
And
That's
it's
awesome.
a little bit like what you're doing. It's really fun to try to get this authentic sound, and it has to sort of be noticeable, but you kind of forget
That's
it's
so
there.
right. Yeah, but you totally forget it's there. It needs to enhance the experience, but it can't distract from it. And
Right.
I've looked at that too, of like doing like a fantasy series for people who play like Dungeons and Dragons and other role playing games.
Exactly, yeah.
Because a lot of people that's out there, like if you look on YouTube, there's a lot of soundscapes that are long soundscapes that people will game for hours and hours and hours and want like a setting for that. It's tricky because role playing games that play over hours, there's different. I don't play, so I'm unfamiliar with it. And if anybody plays, they're gonna like be screaming at their car stereo, like you're getting it all wrong. But there's there's ebbs and flows to the game of like battles and not, and so that's a little tricky to get right. But I've definitely looked at that. I'm interested in figuring out like how can I be the background to people's other things. Like gaming's a great example.
Yeah, it's a cool option. I did so one thing I do is I make sound packs for people that they can use in their music, specifically like Ableton Live users. And one of them I made a while back was environmental sounds of the world, where I just reached out to people like, just record whatever's happening. Don't
Cool,
get
yeah.
fancy, don't try to do it. I mean, you could if you want to,
Yeah, right.
cool sound, but just where are you? What's happening right now? And just get it. And it was a really fun collection to hear that. And then now it's stuff you people can use in their music or for whatever purpose they have. And I noticed, surprisingly to myself, even just all the emotion that came along with each sound, whether it was just like the AC humming outside, or if it was some scenario, some lakeside thing, or just the office, just you're in the office working, and all those sounds. We like, and you said it earlier, like we're really connected emotionally to sounds. I mean, not even just music, just environments and what's going on in there. And it's a fun thing to play around with as far as setting tones, creating worlds in your music. And of course, for people that are just trying to relax and enjoy themselves, like you're doing.
For sure. Yep.
So, do you find like, is there like a crossover with like the ASMR type of thing here? Is that, I mean, like that's been a really huge thing lately too, where people get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Do you find like, are people looking for that kind of thing as well from you, or is it more?
No,
How do you
100%
see
they are.
that?
Yep, that's intuitive of you to see, because it's absolutely the case. It's totally a crossover. A lot of people want more ASMR content from me, or any. I haven't done anything. There's stuff that does kind of serve that purpose, like if you're like walking and crunching in leaves or something, there's
on a
one of those
tent.
in one of my episodes. What's that?
Rain on a tent, I saw in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, totally. Yeah, that stuff is technically ASMR or whatever, but I've not produced stuff just for that purpose. It would be very different if I did. I just haven't. It's just not an area that I've gone into. I haven't been interested in doing it, but a lot of people are asking for it, and it's totally a crossover. People that are interested in listening to ambient audio, that is definitely ASMR is in there.
Are there any more popular sounds, like more popular episodes that people draw to that maybe surprise you a little bit? I'm sure like the white noise, the brown noise, those are probably, if I had to guess, those are probably the big ones. But you've got some, like you said, microwave in popcorn going off for 12 hours. I would never even think to do that, to search that out. I'm wondering if there are any that like kind of surprise you, some of the more strange and unusual ones.
Yeah, there are strange and unusual. I don't know if it's like, oh man, I didn't. Pretty much the things that are up there, I could see as like, yeah, those seem really like they would be up there, but they are still different. I'm running my little report right now in real time to pull up my top episodes that I haven't looked at in the last couple weeks. Obviously, yeah, the noise colors and all the noise colors with the combinations of things are super popular. They're just so consistent. They do the job so well. Like they mask the noise. They even you out. They get you to focus or put you to sleep. So all that's super popular. The anything with rain is really popular. My noise colors combined with the things with rain are great. But then also, yeah, like rain on a tent or rain on a canvas tent. I have like heavy rainstorm. Some of my other ones are like rain in different environments. rainstorm on a windy night, so like combined with wind. One though that I could have seen as being popular for the reasons I believe it is it's way up there, is the highway car ride. It's just 12 hours of a car driving on a highway, and that's super popular with parents with babies, because some parents just want that's all that puts their kid to sleep, and they don't want to drive around. And although you don't get that like motion and stuff that you get in a car, having that noise is really helpful for a lot of babies. So that's really popular.
I've heard of friends of mine literally putting their kids in the car, driving around until they fell asleep, and then carrying them back into bed.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's absolutely a thing for sure.
That's really cool. I think it's an awesome thing what you're doing, and it's a good reminder too, just the power of sound, just the power of ambient sound and noise, and as people making music can really tap into some of this to add dimension to their sounds and their music and take people on a journey. A lot of what we're doing when we're making music is we're creating worlds for the listener. And this is, to me, I feel like it's almost like a cheat code to like kind of put someone someplace where, oh yeah, it gives me this particular vibe. A little rain behind a piano, like right away, sends you somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. As I think about like how does your world and mine collide as far as music production and like ambient audio production? And I think that's absolutely the intersection is how it makes you feel, and like where it puts you, the state that it puts you in. And it is so abundantly clear. My community's made it very clear that certain types of noises help with certain types of things and put you in certain different places. I have a lot of actually health practitioners that use my sounds in their waiting rooms to keep patients calm. Like I have an acupuncturist that usually will send me pictures of like sound machine of the week, and she has like framed on her wall, or a chiropractor, or people are waiting to go have some kind of either procedure or something done, and it keeps them calm and like in a state of just sound, as you know, I mean, this is your whole world and whole life, and people that listen to the show is like sound is an incredibly powerful tool, and audio is an incredibly powerful sense, and sound can absolutely do things and change the demeanor and tone and vibe of an entire mood. And I find that with my noises, even though it's not music, it puts people in a certain mood and gets them in a certain place, whether that's nostalgic or calm or focused. And I think that people who are making music, absolutely those principles cross apply for sure.
That's cool applications there. I guess you hear about that once in a while with, the numbers you're getting. It's so cool that you're having that much success. And I definitely wish you continued success in this. And I think people need to sleep, right? So
that's right. Everybody sleeps.
Yeah. I think you've got yourself a good sustainable business going on here. Anything else before we go? I know we're getting kind of near our time, if not maybe a little bit over. Anything we can tell people, we can send them to the website, of course, 12-hour sound machines, where 12 is the number. That's .com, 12hoursoundmachines.com. But it's also wherever people get podcasts.
Yep, everywhere you get your podcasts. A lot of people find me on, a huge majority of my listenership is on Spotify, because most people that's where they go to get their sounds, period, their audio. And so they forget their sound machine, or they have a really noisy hotel neighbor one night and they're like, oh my gosh, white noise. And they just look at it on Spotify and find me that way. But anywhere you get your podcasts, I'm there as well.
Was there a reason you went for podcasts and not maybe like putting up an album?
Yeah, I wish I had like this like super intuitive like business sensey answer, but it was just straight up that I tried to do. That's what my mind was like, all I'll do is music, and in case anybody listens to it, cool, I'll get royalties. And there's a file limitation. It's pretty low. It's like 25 megabytes or something, but podcast is way higher, so it could actually fit my file size, and that's the only reason I did. I had another podcast on the side, so like I understood the world, knew how to do it, and so I just did it as a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah. And Spotify likes it too because they don't have to pay me royalties. I'm in charge of my own monetization. So, and I think that was part of why early, it's a whole different game now. There's a lot of people in this space now, but I was basically first doing it for real. There was somebody else playing in it that was very popular on YouTube, but pretty much as a podcast, I was kind of first. And so now I have the algorithm advantage, which is basically, I mean, that's the heart of my business, is the fact that I have my algorithm advantage, and that's what I protect really strongly. But like early on, nobody was really doing it. And part of the reason I think that it was successful, that Spotify pointed so many people to me, was I think that it was I mean, this is total speculation. I have no idea, but I think it's because there was a lot of music that was doing this. And at the same time I created this, Spotify was making a huge push into podcasting. If people remember that, like they were buying up companies, they were making a huge push a couple of years ago. And I think they just tweak the algorithm to point people to things that can, if it was a similar solve for music or a podcast, they pointed people to the podcast because they don't pay podcasters. That's my speculation, because I got pretty quick organic growth. And from there, it's been, a lot of hard work, but right away it was a lot of organic growth. And I think that's because they pointed people to me because they didn't have to pay me, but I don't know, speculation.
Maybe. And I guess 12 hours of tracks play is, even for Spotify, what they pay will eventually add up. So
yeah, that's right.
Well, hey man, it's been really fun talking to you. And I think this is great. And I appreciate hearing about your insight and the lessons you've learned, and how this all like kind of applies to us and just the way music and sound affects us. It's really interesting stuff. And it's so cool that it starts from just your own personal need, which I think is the way so many good things come into this world, is somebody needs something that doesn't exist. And then they just make it happen. And that's exactly what you've done.
Sure. And, as you say that, I'll have one more thing, Brian, that I remembered that I think would be helpful for your audience is, the thing that I found about when I just started with pink, brown, and white noise, and there's just so many pink, brown, and white noises out there. And, when people say like, well, what's the difference between your brown noise and somebody else's? I always say like, well, like nothing. Like brown noise is just like a low, nice, full static. But as I listen to like all the brown noises out there, I really like mine. Like it's all of them are a tiny bit different. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I like mine. Mine feels different. People reach out all the time like, I've tried all the brown noises and I like yours the most. And I'm sure people go elsewhere and they're like, oh, I hated that one and I like theirs instead. But a lot of people like mine in particular. And I was telling somebody that, and they said, I think that the future is in this world where there's so many choices. I think the future is taste. And if you can get taste right, I think you can be really successful. And I think all I did was tweak that thing to my taste. I was like, what sounds good to me? A little bit more lows, a little bit less highs. I like that. That's pleasing to my ear, and I think will help my baby sleep. And my taste seems to has resonated with a lot of people with those static noises in particular. And then I try to stay pretty centered to that as I look at new noises and, how much of that mourning dove do I add in? And I think if you have your taste right, and as you look at producing music, I think that's very, very similar. It's like if you just build things to your taste instead of being like, what do people actually want to hear? It's like, well, what's good? What sounds good to me? If you can hone in your taste to be something that resonates with masses, I think that's really valuable.
That's exactly what Rick Rubin has been saying. And he's done like a lot of podcasts and interviews in the last few months with his new book. And that's what he offers as a producer. He's not a musician. He doesn't really know music. At least that's what he says. I bet he's picked up on a few things. But, what he's really saying is I have taste. My taste works for people for some reason, and I know what I like. And that's important. There's enough people in the world, I guess, that if you really like something, you feel strongly about it, there's other people that might be into that as well.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I'll let you go because you probably have a lot of recording to do if you're going to do another 12-hour episode.
That's right. I got 12 hours to go, man. Yeah.
But thanks so much for taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks so much, Brian. Yeah, I appreciated it. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to that episode of the Music Production Podcast with Brandon Reed. Check out 12-Hour Sound Machines. It's a really cool project for adding sound and noise to your life or just to fall asleep to. And it got me thinking about recording in general. It's the tendency to try to get everything perfect and clean when we record, but sometimes it's nice to let a little noise in there. So as a little closing wisdom on the show, as we've been doing the last few episodes, consider allowing some of that noise into your music. Maybe allow the birds to chirp through the window the next time you record a guitar, or let the traffic in the background come through on your vocals. Sometimes that can add some interesting layers to your music that might otherwise be lacking. Of course, we don't want it to overtake our sounds usually, and there's probably a time and place for this, but consider experimenting with it instead of fighting with it. Sometimes the cool thing that happens with a sound recording is that it's a recording of time and a moment, and you can capture that moment by letting the outside world in. Thanks a lot for watching the show. Please consider giving it a review wherever you watch your podcasts. That would mean a lot to me. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care.